Death Note. If you clicked on this video, you've probably already seen it, and if you haven't seen it, then you need to go do that right now. Death Note is widely considered one of the most important anime ever made, and for good reason. The animation is in this brutalist 2000s style with the muted colors and this brilliant use of shadow. Everything is super edgy, and it comes at the weird tail end of the 90s and the beginning of the aughts when rock was still the dominant music form, so you get a ton of awesome metal music underscoring the big scenes, and the intro of course to the second half. So why am I talking about the villain of the show? At its core, Death Note is a political show. If you know anything about Death Note, you know that the characters in the show represent moral positions on crime, fascism, democracy, and so on and so forth. When Light gets the Death Note, a notebook capable of killing anyone you can get the name and face of, he immediately realizes its potential to change the world and mold it in his image. Light represents what I like to call the classical or authoritarian view of crime and society. On pretty much every place on the planet, in every time except for today, people were ruled by kings or emperors. The king exercised absolute authority and crime was not tolerated. One of the earliest written codes of law, the Hammurabi Code, lists off hundreds of crimes, with the punishment for all of them being very extreme. In the lightest case, for example stealing a chicken, you would get your hand cut off. For things like rebellion, cheating with the married man's wife, and other crimes, the punishment was death. The trade-off for having an all-powerful dictator that you can't go against was a safe society and low crime rates. If you committed a crime, you would be punished severely. This is how things worked for a long time, and when humanity started to change and become more democratic, mostly following the rise of Europe and European ideas of liberalism and freedom, our attitudes towards crime changed. In France, after the French Revolution, crime started to be seen more as a symptom of an illness rather than the illness itself. Detectives like Vidocq popularized the idea of rehabilitative imprisonment, basically the idea that criminals just needed to have stable employment, friends, and a happy life so that they may avoid crime. This idea eventually metastasized into the prison reform movements of the 60s and 70s, which resulted in crime rates that exploded in every place that tried rehabilitative policing. For Light's part, in the 2000s, crime was at a near 100-year high in Japan, but arrests were at an all-time low. Rehabilitative policing was obviously not working, and the police were afraid to make arrests. The author of Death Note was obviously experiencing this crime wave, and it became the catalyst of the entire manga. The civilized world cannot exist if the rule of law is not enforced. That's why Light has his infamous "things can't go on like this" speech in the first episode.
命だ。軽いはずがない。僕に勝手に人を裁く権利があるのか。いや、違う。いつも思ってたことじゃないか。世の中腐っている。腐ってる奴は死んだ方がいい。誰かがやらなくてはいけないんだ。自らの精神や命を犠牲にしてでも、このままじゃいけないんだ。
As that awesome music swells and those Christian monks are chanting in the background, however, we see the logical endpoint that Light is reaching. He's thinking that he should be the one to rule this new world. He should be the judge, jury, and executioner. Light obviously wants to be one of those ancient kings, enforcing his absolute power over society, in exchange for freeing society from crime and criminals. The ideal world, the isekai of the intro song, with Light standing in front of a portrait of the fallen angel with his arms outstretched, is a world where he is the undeniable king. L represents the other half of this debate, the democratic side. There isn't too much of an explicit debate between the two characters before Light takes his crushing victory in episode 25, but a few things can be surmised about L's opinions. He says that no one person can take people's lives into their hands the way the Light does, and L calls him childish on a few occasions. His opinions obviously rest on the idea that the justice system should be trusted to handle violent criminals, that the justice system should be more than able to arrest people when necessary and save lives. But his actions don't bear that out. L breaks with all but a few of the Japanese police when the political situation gets dicey in the first couple of episodes. L doesn't end up trusting the police, and he in fact works outside Japanese law when necessary. He sets up illegal surveillance, he hires criminals to spy on Japanese businessmen, he owns several firearms in Japan, where firearms are illegal, and on into infinity. So it can be said that L only pays lip service to the idea of the justice system and democracy. He doesn't use these systems because they slow him down too much. That in itself is a tacit admission that Light is right. L cannot catch him within the confines of the law. L must break the law and become the arbiter of justice in his own way. L called Light childish for trying to become the god of a new world, but L operates in exactly the same fashion, taking justice into his own hands whenever he sees fit. It's brilliant writing, of course. The two mirror each other in many ways. I can't help but feel that the author knew that Light was right, because the show ends so perfectly on episode 25. The stuff with Nier and Light's descent into evil madness has so many plot holes and inconsistencies that I really can't help but feel like the manga was meant to end on Light's victory, but the author was forced to continue the series against his will so publishers could make more money off of his highly popular work. I have no evidence for that, but the practice itself is highly common in the Japanese manga industry, and it has happened to several popular manga whose authors wanted to end much sooner, but were forced to keep writing. Komi can't communicate, love is war, and so on. I won't talk about my problems with the ending in this video, because I believe the ending was episode 25. It is the most thematically satisfying, and it is the episode with the most religious symbology. It has the most weight. Now I know the inevitable comments that hit these kinds of videos pointing out the obvious fact that Light is not a good person. When he manipulates Naomi into giving up her name and then forces her to commit suicide, Light taunts her to her face. He has a penchant for getting a little lost in the sauce when he takes a W, which results in some of his more iconic moments, like the moment where he's in the graveyard and he says, "What do you think of that, L? This is my perfect victory."
What do you think of that, L? This is my perfect victory!
You can tell that he's a sadist, that he gets off on winning, he gets off on their defeat. So when you see the title of the video claiming that Light was right, what I am not saying is that Light Yagami is a good person. Light has a long list of good traits, including his above-average intelligence and his commitment to his task, but Light is not empathetic to people. When Mikasa falls in love with Light, he immediately uses her love as a manipulation tactic to get her to try and kill L for him. He kills people that are investigating him, innocent people who did not deserve to die. You could argue that this is for the greater good, but Light often holds his victory over these people's heads and laughs at them after their defeat. This goes to show that, at least partially, Light did not kill the people investigating him for the greater good or for some other high-minded reason, even though that may be what he tells himself. The bigger reason Light kills people who investigate him is because he feels slighted. Oh, these people don't want to worship me? I'll show them just how inferior they are. Like the sort of thing that his subconscious is saying. It's a statement that manifests literally in the graveyard scene. If you've seen the movie Downfall about a certain Austrian painter, I think the character in that movie is a lot like Light Yagami. The Austrian painter depicted in the movie cares a lot about the abstract idea of Germany and the German people, the Volk, but he has trouble relating to people close to him and forming personal connections. I believe he was autistic, as even his closest friend Albert Speer notes how he loved to talk about architecture for hours without a break, obsessing over the smallest details. Light Yagami is a lot like that, but with more of an egotistical bend. He cares about crime in society in so much as he can use it to make people love him. If he did successfully eradicate violent crime, however, this would make him popular beyond belief. And so that is his true motive. I feel that the ends justify the means in this case. So, even though I don't think Light is a good person, I am more than willing to admit that he is right about violent crime needing to end immediately, and I would support him if he existed in real life. Whether Light does what he does because he truly believes in fixing society or because he wants to become a god, I think that Light's end result is preferable to L's ideal world. Before you protest, I want you to consider the hypothetical that the world of Death Note is presenting. If there existed a book that could kill violent criminals and terrible people immediately, without the long and slow process of law that requires tax dollars and man-hours to run prisons, would you use it? Going a step further, would you let an intelligent, overzealous man who wants to become a god use that book? I think the obvious answer to that question is that you have to suck it up and accept the rule of the capricious emperor. Imagine a world where there are literally no violent crimes. Violent people are removed from the gene pool by force with the stroke of a pen. That sounds like eugenics, right? Well, if you don't believe that criminals who kill people should be executed, I think me and you will never agree about anything. I don't think Light's position is eugenic in nature. He only kills those who commit awful crimes in the first place, and people who impact society in a negative way, like the parasitic businessmen. You might say, well, hey, wait a minute, how do we know if Light is a good judge of which businessmen or which people should be written in the Death Note? What if he thinks that landlords need to die or something ridiculous like that? To that argument, the manga has presented the example of the types of business people that Light Yagami kills. These business people have no scruples about murdering people just to make their stock prices go a bit up. Something that I didn't notice on my first read-through, by the way, is that Light kills all the businessmen in that whole plotline after the arc is over. A good decision in my mind. An understated argument here is that violence is usually genetic. I've put a short list of genes that make a person violent on screen here. Imagine if the people who committed the worst atrocities were not allowed to reproduce because Light wrote their name in the death note. This would cause violence in society to plummet to unthinkable levels of safety because those genes would be removed wholesale. It would literally be the image of the futuristic city from the meme if Light had his way. So, what about the other side? Well, let's start by making a few claims about the world that we live in now. Do you remember my quote from C.S. Lewis that I pasted in earlier? I'll put it back up here. I think that this quote perfectly summarizes the L versus Light debate and the debate between democracy and dictatorship as a whole. We live in a society ruled by the omnipotent moral busybody. In the United States, things are decided for us without a vote all the time. Even the presidential election comes down to how much money the candidates can raise from billionaires more than anything to do with votes. Let me be as plain as I can be. If you live in the United States and you don't live in a swing state, your vote literally does not matter. We do not live in a democracy. It's closer to an oligarchy ruled by people who think they're better than you. This is the status quo. This is the system L is fighting to keep alive. A system where shadowy oligarchs and detectives who expose their feet way too much make decisions for everyone else. I would much rather have a dictator who makes arrogant decisions in line with his ego. I would rather the cupidity of the robber baron than the omnipotent moral busybody.